My name is Isabella Grace Morton, 28 years old. The church looked like something pulled straight out of a fairy tale. White roses cascaded down the altar, their petals scattered along the aisle like soft snow. Golden sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, bathing the pews in a kaleidoscope of colors that shimmered across polished wood. The air smelled faintly of wax from the tall candles burning near the pulpit, and beneath it all was the hush of anticipation, like the world was holding its breath for me. 200 guests filled the pews, their faces glowing with expectation, their eyes following me as I took each step forward. The string quartet played softly in the background, their notes swelling and dipping like a tide, underscoring the moment. My heart hammered against my ribs, but not from fear. It was the exhilarating kind of heartbeat that comes only when every dream you've ever had seems to be materializing at once. At the altar, Colton James Wellington stood waiting in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his dark eyes locked on mine. His jaw was clenched, a flicker of nerves tugging at his otherwise composed face. That detail made me smile. Even after 3 years together, I could still make him nervous. The pastor, Father Rodriguez, opened his worn Bible. His voice carried with warmth and gravity as he said, "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Colton James Wellington and Isabella Grace Morton in holy matrimony." My palms were slick inside my gloves. I squeezed Colton's hands, and he squeezed back, though his grip was faintly trembling. "Do you, Colton, take Isabella to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part?" Colton's throat bobbed. "I do," he said. His voice cracked, just slightly, but it was enough to send a ripple of tender laughter through our guests. The pastor turned to me. "Do you, Isabella, take Colton to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness?" And then it happened. A voice, sharp as a blade, cut through the air. "Wait!" Every head turned. The sacred silence shattered with a collective gasp, a ripple moving through the congregation like a wave breaking on shore. It was Karen Oscar, my maid of honor, my best friend since kindergarten. Karen rose from her place beside me, the dusty rose bridesmaid dress we had chosen together clinging to her figure. Her hair, styled in loose waves that morning, glowed under the filtered sunlight. But her face was twisted into something ugly I had never seen before. Her lips quivered, not from nerves, but from anger, defiance, something darker. "I can't let this happen," she announced. Her voice rang with such conviction it echoed to every corner of the church. My father half rose from his seat in the front pew. My mother gripped his arm tightly, her knuckles white, urging him to stay put. Behind them, my grandmother's rosary beads clicked rapidly as she muttered prayers in Spanish. "Karen," I whispered, keeping my voice steady, though I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What are you doing?" The whispers swelled around us, a low buzzing like a hive disturbed. Karen lifted her chin. Her eyes burned with an unsettling mixture of triumph and something that almost looked like desperation. "Isabella," she said, "you need to know the truth before you ruin your life." My heart stuttered. "What truth?" "I'm pregnant." The words slammed into me with the force of a freight train. For a heartbeat, I couldn't even process them. My bouquet slipped in my hands, petals trembling against my gloves. "And Colton," Karen continued, her voice hardening, "is the father." The gasps turned into loud exclamations. Someone behind me muttered, "Oh my God," loud enough for everyone to hear. The quartet's music faltered, bows skidding against strings before the sound collapsed altogether. Colton's face drained of color until he looked like a man carved from marble. His mouth opened, then closed again. His gaze darted between me and Karen like he was drowning, searching for air that wasn't there. "Karen," he rasped, "don't." "Don't what?" she snapped, stepping closer. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, every sound like a gunshot in the silence. "Don't tell her the truth. Don't tell her how you've been coming to my apartment for months. Don't tell her how you said you were having second thoughts about this wedding, how you whispered that you loved me while you—" "Enough." My brother Tristan shot to his feet, his face contorted with rage, his fists clenched, his chest heaving like a caged animal ready to strike. My younger sister Sydney clutched his arm, whispering frantically for him to sit, to not destroy what was left of the ceremony. Karen's smirk grew wider, feeding off the chaos. She turned her attention back to me, her eyes gleaming with victory. "Face it, Isabella. You're the consolation prize." He settled for you because I wouldn't commit. But now that we're having a baby, she pressed a hand against her still flat stomach. Well, priorities change. The church had gone utterly still. Even the children, restless minutes earlier, were silent, sensing the gravity of what had just unfolded. My grandmother's prayer beads slipped from her hands and clattered against the pew, but she didn't stop whispering prayers. I stared at Colton, searching for denial, anger, anything that would prove Karen's words false, but all I saw was guilt. His forehead glistened with sweat. His hands shook. His lips trembled with words he couldn't force out. He couldn't even look at me. A part of me wanted to collapse right there, to let the weight of betrayal crush me into the marble floor. Another part wanted to scream until the stained glass shattered, but neither happened. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was sharp, deliberate, the kind of smile a predator gives when the prey thinks it's already won. "Oh, Karen," I said softly, my voice carrying clearly in the silence. "You poor, delusional little girl." Her smirk faltered, and for the first time that day, the power shifted. Karen's eyes narrowed, her confidence quivering under the weight of my smile. For a second, just a second, she looked uncertain, as if she had expected me to break, to weep, to collapse at her feet while she stood triumphant. Instead, I met her glare with a calmness that even I didn't understand. "You think this is funny?" she demanded, her voice sharper now, cracking slightly at the edges. "You think you can dismiss me, Isabella? You deserve to know what he did." My grip on the bouquet tightened, stems digging into my palm. "Oh, Karen," I whispered again, softer this time, almost pitying. The congregation leaned forward. Even the priest froze, his Bible half closed in his hands, unable to move past this storm breaking over the altar. "Tell her," Karen snapped, whipping her head toward Colton. "Tell her the nights you spent at my apartment. Tell her how you told me she wasn't enough for you, that you felt trapped. Tell her how you said I was the one you truly loved." Colton's lips parted. His voice cracked. "Karen, stop." "Don't you dare tell me to stop," her voice thundered, feeding off the gasps from the pews. "I carried your secrets for months while she pranced around planning this wedding like some fairy tale. I won't stay silent anymore." Tristan surged forward again, his eyes blazing murder, but Sydney and my cousin Roberto held him back. My brother's jaw clenched so hard I thought he'd break his teeth. "You lying witch," he spat across the church. "You'll regret this." "Sit down, Tristan," Sydney hissed, but even she was shaking. I stood frozen, but my mind wasn't blank. It was racing, darting between the past and present. Memories crashed into me like a tidal wave. Moments with Karen, my best friend, my sister in all but blood. We had grown up side by side on Maple Street. She lived 3 houses down. Summer afternoons were spent in each other's yards, our dolls and dreams colliding. Sleepovers that turned into whispered confessions, our flashlights flickering beneath blankets. We swore we'd never betray each other. We promised distance, time, even men would never come between us. When we were teenagers, we sketched dresses in spiral notebooks and promised to move to New York to conquer fashion together. She cheered when I told her I wanted to be a nurse instead, saying, "I'll market your designs. You'll heal the world. Either way, we'll be unstoppable." She had been the first person I called when I got accepted into nursing school. The first person I told when Colton proposed under the Christmas lights on the beach. She squealed, pixelated on FaceTime, her grin splitting across the screen. "You deserve this, Issa. You deserve everything." How ironic, I thought, staring at her now, dripping venom in the same church where she had promised to stand by me forever. "Karen," I said slowly, steadying my voice, "we've known each other since we were 5. You were supposed to be my sister." Her chin trembled, but her words cut like knives. "I was your sister, until he chose me." Gasps rippled again. I turned to Colton. He looked sick, his skin waxy, his hands trembling. "Is it true?" I asked him. My voice didn't crack, it rang with steel. "Say something. Deny it. Fight for me. Do anything." But he couldn't. His eyes darted between me and Karen, his mouth opening, closing, no words escaping. Karen stepped into the silence. "He doesn't love you, Isabella. He settled for you because I wasn't ready, but now everything's changed." She pressed her hand more firmly against her stomach, as though the flatness beneath her palm was already swelling with proof. The guests' whispers grew into a roar. I heard fragments. How could she do this? At the altar. Poor Isabella. That baby. My father's face darkened with rage. He started to rise, but my mother tugged him back down, whispering, "No, let Isabella handle this." Her eyes never left mine, brimming with fury and pride all at once. For the first time, Karen's gaze flicked nervously around the church. She had expected shock, sympathy, maybe even support, but what she found were faces twisted in disgust, pity, and judgment. She wasn't the heroine of this scene. She was the villain, exposed under stained glass light. She turned back to me, defiant. "You can't fight the truth, Isabella. He loves me. He told me he does." Something inside me snapped, not like glass shattering, but like a string pulled taut until it hummed with dangerous clarity. I lifted my chin, my voice soft, but cutting enough to slice through the uproar. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Karen?" Her eyes flickered. "What?" "A desperate little girl who has mistaken betrayal for victory." The silence that followed was deafening. The congregation stilled, waiting, sensing that something far bigger was about to unfold. Karen blinked. For the first time, doubt shadowed her expression. You're bluffing." I tilted my head, smiling faintly, the smile that had unnerved her before. "Am I?" The marble beneath my shoes felt cold. My hands stopped shaking. My breath evened out. Inside, something icy and powerful anchored itself. Stronger than heartbreak, stronger than fear. Colton whispered my name, Isabella. But I didn't look at him. My eyes stayed locked on Karen. "You think this is your moment?" I asked, my tone calm and deliberate. "But it's mine." The church, the guests, the whispers, all of it seemed to fade, like the world was narrowing into a stage with only two players, me and her. And she had no idea she was about to lose. Karen's face flushed crimson, her chest heaving with each breath. She looked around at the congregation as if waiting for someone, anyone, to come to her defense. But the silence that hung over the pews was thick and suffocating, broken only by the faint buzz of whispered disbelief. Colton finally found his voice, hoarse and strained. "Isabella, please. This isn't what it looks like." I turned my head toward him, my smile never faltering. "Oh, Colton, it's exactly what it looks like." He flinched, as though my words were a physical blow. Karen stepped forward, desperation twisting her expression. "Don't listen to him. He was ready to call this wedding off. He told me he couldn't go through with it because he loves me." "You don't know what you're saying," Colton muttered, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. The guests shifted uneasily, murmurs rising and falling like waves against a cliff. I caught the eye of my grandmother, her lips moving furiously over her rosary, her gaze burning with the fire of a woman who had seen betrayal before and recognized the devil's fingerprints on it. "Karen," I said, my voice slicing through the noise, "you've had your performance. Now it's my turn." Her smirk twitched back into place. "You think you can talk your way out of this? You're humiliated. Everyone knows." I tilted my head, holding her gaze. "Everyone knows what you want them to know, but you forgot something about me." A ripple of confusion moved through the room. Colton's brows knit together. Karen's lips parted, uncertainty finally creeping into her features. I slowly reached into my bouquet, nestled between the stems and ribbon, and pulled out my phone. Gasps echoed through the church as I raised it in my hand. "What are you doing?" Karen demanded, her voice just a little too high. I pressed a button. The speakers we'd installed for the reception music crackled to life, and suddenly the church was filled not with silence, not with prayers, but with Karen's voice. "God, Colton is such an idiot," her recorded laughter rang out, bright and cruel. "He has no idea I've been sleeping with his brother and his best man. The pregnancy could be any of theirs, but Colton makes the most money, so obviously he's my best bet for child support." The church erupted in chaos. Shocked gasps, outraged whispers, someone shouting, "What did she just say?" My father's hand clenched around the pew in front of him so hard I thought the wood might splinter. Karen's face drained of color. No, that's not..." But the recording continued, crystal clear. "Anna's so pathetically naive, it's almost sad. She actually thinks Colton loves her. Meanwhile, he can't keep his hands off me every time she works late shifts. The best part is, she's paying for half the wedding. So technically, she's funding her own humiliation." A strangled cry came from the back pew. Someone shouted, "Shame on you!" Karen stumbled backward, her heels skidding against the marble floor. Someone must have... "Isa, you have to believe me." "Believe you?" I asked, my voice steady, amplified now by the same speakers she had just been condemned through. "Karen, I don't need to believe anything. I have the truth. right here, and every single person in this room has just heard it. Colton's face was ashen, his body sagging like a man awaiting execution. His eyes darted desperately between me, Karen, and the guests, but he didn't move, didn't fight, didn't deny. Karen dropped to her knees, her palms flat on the cold marble floor. "Please, Isabella, please, I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean to get caught," I corrected sharply. "There's a difference." She shook her head violently, her hair whipping across her face. "No, I swear, I was drunk. I didn't mean those things." "Stop lying." My voice cracked like a whip. "You've been lying so long, you don't even recognize the truth anymore." The guests stirred, their whispers a storm of judgment swirling around us. How could she do this? With the best man? And the brother, too? The words cut into Karen, visible in the way her shoulders shook. Detective Rivera once told me that liars always crumble fastest under the weight of their own words. Looking at Karen, I finally understood what he meant. Colton whispered again, "Isabella, please." I turned on him, fury lacing my veins. "You don't get to beg. Not here. Not after everything." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His lips moved helplessly, like a fish gasping for water and air that would never come. "Do you want to know the worst part, Karen?" I asked softly, leaning down just enough so only she could hear the first few words. Her eyes lifted, wide and wet, desperate for some shred of mercy. I straightened, my voice loud enough for the whole church. "The worst part is you thought you were smarter than me. You thought you'd play your game, and I'd play the fool. But this—" I gestured toward the speakers still humming faintly with the tail end of her confession. "This was never your stage. It's mine." Karen's mascara streaked down her face as she sobbed. "Please, Issa, don't ruin me. Don't let them— don't!" "You ruined yourself," I cut in coldly. For a moment there was only silence. Heavy, suffocating, charged silence. Then the whispers resumed, louder this time, tinged with anger, disgust, pity. Karen crumpled fully onto the floor, her body folding in on itself like a marionette with cut strings. Colton stood rigid, pale as ash, trembling as though he might collapse next. And me? I stood tall in the gown I had dreamed of since I was a girl, not as a bride anymore, but as something far more dangerous. Because the trap had only just begun to close. Karen's sobs echoed against the marble floor, the sound raw and desperate, but it did nothing to move me. The guests' whispers swelled into a low roar, voices tumbling over one another in shock and outrage. Some leaned forward, unable to look away, while others turned their faces as if ashamed to witness the carnage unraveling in a house of God. I waited until the voices peaked, then lifted my hand. Silence fell like a curtain dropping on a stage. Every eye turned back to me. "Karen says she's pregnant with Colton's child," I began, my tone even, deliberate, "but there's something she hasn't told you." Karen's head jerked up. Her face was blotchy, her mascara streaked. "Don't!" she croaked, her voice trembling. I smiled faintly. "Oh, but I must." From inside the folds of my bouquet, I pulled another paper, folded neatly, the kind of document that spoke louder than any words. I held it high for the congregation to see. "This," I announced, "is the paternity test Karen took last week." Gasps rippled through the church. My grandmother crossed herself so quickly her rosary nearly slipped from her fingers. Karen scrambled to her feet, shaking her head. "That's not real! You're making this up!" "Am I?" I opened the paper, the official letterhead glinting under the stained glass light. 24% probability that Colton is the father. I let the words hang heavy in the air. For those unfamiliar with genetics, that means definitely not the father. The church erupted. Some guests clapped hands over their mouths. Others exclaimed openly. A baby in the back pew wailed, startled by the chaos. Colton staggered back a step, his face drained of what little color remained. "Not mine?" His voice cracked, disbelief dripping from each syllable. Karen lunged toward him, clutching his sleeve. "Colton, please, it was a mistake. The test is wrong." I cut her off, my voice sharp and clear. "The test also shows a 99% probability that the father is—" I paused, savoring the suspense. "On James Wellington." A collective gasp roared through the church like thunder. Heads swiveled toward the groomsmen line. James, Colton's younger brother, paled instantly, his confident smirk wiped clean. He stepped back, eyes darting toward the doors like a trapped animal seeking escape. Rachel, James's fiancée, bolted upright from her seat among Colton's family. Her hand shook as she pointed at him, her voice a piercing scream. "What did she just say?" "Rachel, please," James stammered, his composure fracturing. It wasn't." "Not what?" Rachel's voice cracked, raw with betrayal. "Not true? Not you? Or not just you?" The congregation buzzed louder, words overlapping. His own brother? Dear God, what kind of family? That poor girl. Colton turned toward James, his jaw tight, fury radiating from him. "You! With her?" His voice shook with rage. James lifted his hands defensively. "Colton, listen, it wasn't serious. Just a mistake. A few times, that's all." "A few times?" Rachel's voice split the air like glass shattering. She took a step forward, her eyes blazing with betrayal. "You told me you loved me. You told me we were forever." James's mouth opened, but no words came. The chaos should have ended there, but it didn't. Because Karen wasn't finished, and neither was I. "Wait!" Michael Foster's wife shouted suddenly from the front row, her face contorted with dawning horror. "Did she say, best man?" All eyes swung toward Michael, Colton's best friend, standing stiff at the end of the groomsmen line. His body went rigid, his jaw locked, eyes fixed on the floor as if the marble could swallow him whole. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it back into my bouquet. "Yes," I said calmly, my voice carrying to every corner of the church. "Michael Foster is also a possible father. Karen wasn't satisfied destroying just one family. She wanted them all." The eruption that followed was indescribable. Rachel screamed at James. Michael's wife shrieked like a wounded animal, lunging toward her husband before her sister restrained her. Colton's relatives covered their faces in shame while my side of the church seethed in fury, some rising to their feet as though ready to drag the culprits out themselves. Karen clutched her stomach protectively, her voice trembling. "Stop it, all of you. This baby deserves a father. Colton deserves to be with me, the woman he truly loves." "Loves?" I spat, cutting her off. "Do you really think love looks like this? Do you think betrayal, lies, and manipulation count as love?" Her lip trembled, but she forced out a shaky, "Yes, because he chose me." Colton finally snapped, his voice hoarse with rage. "Chose you? Karen, you've ruined everything. My family, my fiancé, my life." She flinched, her eyes wide with horror at his outburst. For the first time, she realized he wasn't defending her. He wasn't protecting her. He was exposing her with his silence, with his guilt, with his fury. Rachel collapsed into the pew, sobbing. Michael's wife covered her face, shaking with grief. James ran a hand through his hair, his chest heaving as though the walls were closing in. And I stood still, my gown pooling around me like a throne of silk, my heart pounding with icy clarity. This was no longer just my betrayal. This was everyone's reckoning. The church was a battlefield. Families shattered, vows broken before they were ever spoken, secrets laid bare in the harshest light. And as the storm raged, I smiled again. Because they thought they had buried me under shame, but all along I had been the one digging graves. The church was in chaos, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I waited, letting the screaming matches, the sobbing, the gasps, all burn themselves out. Slowly the noise dimmed into uneasy murmurs, and then into silence, until the only sound was the hollow thud of my own heartbeat. Karen stood trembling, mascara streaking her cheeks, her hand clutched to her stomach as though the gesture could shield her from the truth I'd already unleashed. Colton swayed beside her, pale and glassy-eyed, his tuxedo suddenly too big for the broken man inside it. James had his face in his hands, Rachel weeping furiously behind him. Michael's wife shook with fury, held back only by her sister's desperate grip. I stepped forward, the pearls sewn into my gown, catching the fractured sunlight from the stained glass. "You all look so surprised," I said softly, my voice steady, calm, as if this wasn't inevitable. Karen's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" I pulled another item from my bouquet, a slim folder, edges worn, filled with documents. Gasps rose as I held it aloft. "This," I said, "is everything I've gathered for the past 6 months. Every lie, every betrayal, every stolen penny, every shred of proof." Karen's knees buckled. No, you couldn't have." "Oh, but I did," I interrupted, my smile razor sharp. "Do you know what you forget, Karen? I'm a nurse. I'm trained to notice details, to collect evidence without anyone noticing. Hair from your brush when I came over for planning sessions, coffee cups you carelessly left behind, saliva on wine glasses. Every careless scrap you left in your wake, I collected." Murmurs swelled, guests whispering furiously. I flipped the folder open, reading from one of the papers. Let's start simple. February 14th, Valentine's Day. While I was working a double shift at the hospital, Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor, saw you leaving my apartment building at 6 a.m. She took a photo. I held up the image for the congregation. Karen in yesterday's clothes, hair mussed, eyes shadowed, the classic walk of shame. Karen covered her face with her hands, shaking her head. Stop it! Oh, we're only beginning. I pulled another paper from the folder. Then there are the credit card statements, small charges at coffee shops across town, jewelry stores, hotels. Nothing big enough to alarm me on their own, but together, a pattern, a damning one, like the necklace around your neck. Karen's trembling hand flew up, clutching the delicate chain with its tiny diamond pendant, the same one I'd spotted on a statement and naively assumed was a surprise for me. The congregation erupted again, exclamations ringing through the vaulted ceiling. Colton buried his face in his hands. Isabella, please. Don't you dare beg, I snapped, cutting him off. You spent my grandmother's engagement ring money to cover her rent when she lost her job. You drained $5,000 from our wedding account to pay her credit card bills. And you thought I wouldn't notice. The crowd's murmur sharpened into outrage. My father half rose, fury radiating from him, but my mother pulled him down again, whispering fiercely, Let her finish. Let her finish. Colton's eyes brimmed with tears. I didn't mean... You didn't mean to get caught, I hissed, echoing my earlier words to Karen. But you meant every single transaction. You meant every betrayal. Karen collapsed against the altar steps, her body trembling violently. Please, Isabella, we've been friends since we were 5. Don't destroy me like this. The plea might have once cracked me, but not now. You destroyed us long before today, I said coldly. Every lie was another blade in my back. Every smile was poison. Today, I'm just showing everyone the truth. The whispers grew louder. Some guests were on their feet now, their faces twisted in disbelief and disgust. The sacred church had become a courtroom, and I stood as prosecutor, witness, and judge all in one. Karen's voice broke into a scream. This isn't you! You're not like this! You're not cruel! I laughed, the sound low and sharp. Cruel? No, Karen. Cruel is sleeping with my fiancé. Cruel is stealing my money, my trust, my future. Cruel is stabbing your best friend in the back and expecting her to smile while you twist the knife. Her sobs tore through the silence. She folded onto her knees, mascara staining the marble, her body shaking with hysteria. I lifted the folder higher. But the financial betrayal, I turned sharply to Colton, who flinched. That's the part you'll both answer for. Loans taken out in my name. Accounts opened with my social security number. $50,000 missing from my inheritance account. The crowd gasped so loudly it echoed like thunder. My father exploded, surging to his feet. 50,000 from her inheritance? Yes, Papa, I said firmly, my eyes never leaving Colton. They stole it. Together. Karen wailed, No, it was me. It was all me. No, I snapped. It wasn't. Colton co-signed. Colton forged my name on loan applications. Colton guaranteed her accounts with my income. Don't you dare try to take the fall alone now, Karen. Not when he was right there with you. Colton finally broke, his voice ragged. I was trying to help her. She said she'd pay it back, that it was temporary. I didn't mean to... To ruin me? My voice sliced through him like a blade. Because that's exactly what you did. The congregation roared with outrage again. Some of Colton's relatives lowered their heads in shame. My side hissed and cursed in English and Spanish, their fury a wave that rolled through the pews. And then, faint at first, but growing louder, the sound of sirens in the distance. Karen froze, her wide eyes snapping to me. No, you didn't. Colton's lips trembled. Isabella, what did you do? I smiled, slow and deliberate. I called the police. The church fell utterly silent, as if the very air had been sucked out of the room. Today, I said, my voice steady as the wail of sirens grew closer, you don't just answer to me, you answer to the law. Karen's scream cracked through the silence. No, Isa, please, don't do this. Colton staggered toward me, desperation flooding his face. Isabella, please, think about what you're doing. But I didn't move. I didn't tremble. I stood tall in front of 200 witnesses, holding the folder of evidence like a torch in the dark. Because justice was no longer coming. Justice was here. The wail of sirens drew closer. echoing through the stained glass windows until it seemed the church itself was vibrating with judgment. Every head in the congregation turned toward the doors, their whispers swelling into frantic murmurs. Some clutched their pearls, others their rosaries, while a few of Colton's relatives looked as though they might faint right there in the pews. Karen clutched her stomach, her face streaked with black rivers of mascara. "No," she whimpered, shaking her head violently. "You wouldn't dare. Asa, please, we can fix this. We can make it right." Colton staggered forward, desperation in his eyes. "Isabella, stop this madness. You don't have to do this. We can work it out privately." "Privately?" My laugh was sharp, bitter. "You made my humiliation public, Colton. Now the truth gets to be public too." The heavy church doors swung open with a crash that silenced the room. The sound of boots against marble echoed as Detective Rivera strode inside, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. His expression was grim, his presence commanding, his eyes sweeping across the chaos like a judge surveying the guilty. "Isabella," he called, his deep voice steady. "I got your message. Are these the suspects?" I stepped forward, calm, deliberate, every eye on me. "Yes, Detective. Karen Oscar and Colton Wellington. All the evidence is in the folder I sent to your office last week. What you're holding is just the highlights." Karen's knees buckled. She sank against the altar steps, trembling so hard she looked like she might collapse entirely. "No, no, no, please! Issa, don't do this to me. We're family. We grew up together. You can't let them take me away." "You stopped being my family the moment you betrayed me," I said coldly, "and I'm not the one taking you away. The law is." The congregation erupted in whispers again, frantic and shocked. My father stood abruptly, his voice booming across the church. "Detective, if she stole from my daughter, if he did, make them pay. Every penny, every lie." "Papa," I said gently but firmly, "I've got this." Detective Rivera nodded to the officers, who moved swiftly up the aisle. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed louder than any hymn. "Karen Oscar," Rivera intoned, his voice steady, "you're under arrest for identity theft, fraud, and embezzlement." Karen shrieked as one of the officers pulled her arms behind her back. "No, Isabella, please, I'll pay you back, every penny. I'll do anything. Don't let them take me." The steel snapped shut around her wrists. Her sobs turned guttural, wild. She thrashed, mascara staining her cheeks like war paint. "We're sisters, Issa. Don't throw me away like this." I met her gaze, my heart stone. "You threw us away the moment you chose lies over loyalty." Rivera turned to Colton, who stood frozen, his face pale, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "Colton Wellington, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement." The second officer stepped forward, cuffs glinting in the fractured light. Colton finally broke, stumbling back a step. "Wait, no, this isn't fair. I was tricked. She manipulated me." He pointed frantically at Karen, his voice cracking. "She's the mastermind. I only wanted to protect her." Karen spun on him, her cuffed hands jerking against steel. "Protect me? Don't you dare blame me. You signed the papers. You took the money. You're just as guilty as I am." Their voices collided in the air, shrill and desperate. The congregation looked on, horrified, like witnesses at a car crash they couldn't look away from. Detective Rivera's expression didn't flicker. He gestured, and the officer snapped the cuffs around Colton's wrists. The sound rang out, final, undeniable. Colton sagged, the fight draining from him in an instant. His eyes found mine, pleading, "Isabella, please, don't let them do this. You loved me once. Doesn't that mean anything?" For a heartbeat, I saw the man I thought I loved. The Colton who brought flowers every Sunday, who kissed my forehead when I was tired from long shifts, who promised me forever. My chest tightened. For the briefest moment, grief pricked at the edges of my resolve. Then I remembered the necklace on Karen's throat, the forged signatures, the drained inheritance, the lies whispered in another woman's bed. My voice was steady, ice cold. "It meant everything, Colton. That's why this hurts so much. But love without honesty isn't love at all. It's poison." His eyes brimmed with tears as the officer pulled him back, steel biting into his wrists. He didn't resist. He just stared at me like a man watching his entire world crumble into dust. Karen sobbed, her voice raw. "Isa, please, I'll change, I swear. Don't let them take me. I can be better. I can." I shook my head slowly. "You can explain yourself to the judge, Karen. You'll have plenty of time in court." The congregation was utterly silent now. No one moved. No one spoke. 200 witnesses watched as my best friend and my fiancé, two people I had trusted most, were led down the aisle in chains. My grandmother's rosary beads clicked faster, her whispered prayers a solemn backdrop to the metallic echo of handcuffs. Children clutched their mothers. Relatives wiped at tears, some of rage, others of grief. The doors swung open again, and the sunlight from outside poured in like judgment itself as the officers marched them out. Karen screamed my name one last time, her voice cracking on the vowels, echoing through the sacred space until the doors slammed shut behind her. And then silence. The kind of silence that vibrates, heavy and absolute. I stood at the altar in my wedding gown, my bouquet clutched loosely in my hand, the folder of evidence pressed against my side like armor. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it had become a reckoning. I lifted my chin and faced the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm inside me. "I apologize for the interruption, but sometimes the truth refuses to stay hidden." No one spoke, no one moved. And then, softly at first, my grandmother began to clap. The sound echoed, sharp and deliberate. One by one, others joined. My father, my mother, my siblings, my cousins, my friends, even some of Colton's relatives who looked mortified by their family's shame. Soon, the entire congregation was on their feet, applauding. Not the wedding, not the disaster, but the strength it took to expose it. For the first time that day, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something like freedom. The echo of the church doors closing behind Colton and Karen lingered like a final exhale. The sound of handcuffs, the sting of their voices begging and accusing, the crash of shattered illusions, it was all gone. In their absence, the silence was deafening. I stood at the altar, my wedding gown pooling around me, my bouquet limp in my hands. My body felt both heavy and light, as though I had been hollowed out and filled with something too big to contain. 200 guests stared at me, some in shock, some in awe, some in pity. The air was thick, humming with the weight of what they had witnessed. My father was the first to move. He pushed through the pews, his tall frame rigid with fury, but his eyes soft when they landed on me. He mounted the altar steps and pulled me into his arms without a word. His embrace was crushing, protective, as if he could shield me from everything that had just transpired. "Mija," he whispered into my hair, his voice raw with emotion. "You turned your wedding into justice. I've never been prouder." Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. My mother joined us, her hand warm against my back. "What they did to you is unforgivable," she said firmly. Her eyes glistened, but her jaw was set with steel. "But you stood tall, Isabella. You didn't let them break you." Tristan forced his way forward next, his fists still clenched, his jaw rigid. His face was flushed, his chest heaving like a man who had been fighting to stay seated. "Isa, I should have seen it. I should have known something was wrong. I should have protected you." I turned to him, shaking my head. "You couldn't have known. I barely knew myself until I started digging. Don't blame yourself for their lies." He swallowed hard, his eyes burning with guilt. "Still, I swear on my life, if Colton ever comes near you again, I'll—" "Tristan!" Sydney's voice cut in, sharp but tinged with warmth. She stood beside him, her arms crossed, her eyes a mix of fury and admiration. "No murdering. She's already done the work. You'd only make a mess of it." Despite everything, a small laugh bubbled in my chest. My siblings, always themselves, even in the ruins. Sydney stepped closer, her voice softening. "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen. You stood there in front of everyone and burned them with the truth. You didn't just survive, you owned it." Her words broke through the icy armor I had wrapped around myself. My throat tightened, and for the first time that day, my vision blurred with tears I couldn't stop. "Come here," she murmured, pulling me into a hug that smelled of her vanilla shampoo and felt like home. The congregation slowly began to stir. Aunts, uncles, cousins, friends. Some approached cautiously, others boldly, but all with the same look in their eyes. Pride, pity, and admiration tangled together. "You're stronger than I ever knew," whispered my cousin Maria, pressing my hand. "You did what most women only dream of," muttered Aunt Vivian, shaking her head. "God bless you, Isa," said Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor, tears streaking her cheeks. Even Father Rodriguez approached, his Bible tucked under his arm. his voice gentle but steady. "My dear," he said, "are you all right?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I don't know," I admitted honestly, "but I think I will be." He nodded, his lined face soft with compassion. "Would you allow me to offer a prayer? Not a wedding blessing, but one for strength, for truth, for courage." My throat tightened again, but I nodded. "Yes, Father, please." The congregation bowed their heads as Father Rodriguez lifted his hands. His voice carried through the vaulted space, no longer filled with accusations, but with something steadier, warmer. "Lord, we thank you for truth revealed, even when it comes in pain. We thank you for the strength you have given Isabella to stand against lies, against betrayal, against darkness. May she walk forward from this day not in shame, but in freedom. May those who betrayed her face justice, and may she find healing in the arms of those who truly love her." "Amen," the congregation echoed, voices trembling, unified. I closed my eyes, the words wrapping around me like a blanket. For the first time since Karen stood and shattered my wedding, I felt the icy grip on my chest loosen. When I opened them, Sydney was watching me closely. "You okay?" she whispered. "I think so," I said softly. "For the first time in a long time, yes." But then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something strange. A few guests weren't bowing their heads in prayer. They weren't even watching me. They were holding up their phones, recording, streaming, capturing every second. My stomach dropped. "Tell me they aren't," I muttered. Sydney followed my gaze. She winced. "Issa, I think this is already online." "What?" My pulse spiked. She pulled out her phone, her thumbs flying. After a moment, she bit her lip. And it had "Wedding Revenge is trending," and it looks like someone live-streamed the whole thing. My breath caught. Live-streamed? As in, the world just saw... Sydney showed me her screen. My name. My face. The clip of me pressing play on Karen's recorded confession. Millions of views piling up by the second. The church suddenly felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were closing in. My humiliation, my justice. It wasn't confined to these walls anymore. It was spreading, wildfire fast. I forced myself to breathe, slowly in, out. "Issa," Sydney said softly, her eyes searching mine. "People are calling you a hero." A hero. The word felt foreign on my tongue. Hours ago, I had been a bride, then a victim, then a prosecutor in lace. And now, a hero? I swallowed hard, the weight of it settling deep inside me. Maybe the world didn't just witness my destruction. Maybe, just maybe, they had witnessed my rebirth. Sydney's phone glowed in her hands, the screen lighting up with notifications faster than she could swipe them away. "Issa," she whispered, her eyes wide. "You're everywhere. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Someone clipped the recording you played and posted it with the caption, 'Bride exposes cheating groom and maid of honor at the altar.'" She looked up at me, her voice trembling between awe and disbelief. "It already has 2 million views. 2 million. The number slammed into me harder than any of Karen's words had. My humiliation, my carefully planned revenge, my heartbreak. It wasn't confined to the 4 walls of this church anymore. It was being dissected, analyzed, applauded, judged, and spread like wildfire across the world. I forced myself to steady my breathing. What are people saying?" Sydney scrolled, her brows furrowed, then her lips curved into a grin. "They're calling you a queen, a legend. Listen to this." She read aloud. "This woman is an icon. The way she stayed calm, queen behavior." Another. "I wish I had her courage when my ex cheated. She turned her wedding into justice. And here, plot twist of the century. Somebody make this a Netflix show." The congregation around us buzzed again. This time not in outrage, but in fascination. Some of the younger guests whispered to each other, already pulling out their phones, refreshing feeds, nodding as they read comments. I felt the ground sway beneath me. Hours ago, I was supposed to be a bride, stepping into the next chapter of my life. Now I was... what? A meme? A headline? An accidental symbol of female empowerment? Sydney squeezed my arm. "Issa, this isn't bad. This is good. People aren't mocking you. They're celebrating you." I shook my head, dazed. "They're celebrating a train wreck." "No." She looked me dead in the eyes. They're celebrating that you turned the wreck into a firestorm of truth. You didn't hide. You didn't crumble. You burned them down with their own lies. Before I could respond, my mother swept in, her expression set with purpose. "We paid for this reception," she announced loudly, her voice carrying through the church. "We paid for the food, the music, the flowers. This day will not be wasted." The guests stirred, uncertain. My mother clapped her hands once, sharply. "Everyone, we're going to celebrate. Not a wedding, no. Today we celebrate Isabella's freedom. We celebrate her strength. We celebrate the truth." My father nodded vigorously, his eyes fierce. "She deserves joy, not pity. If those two snakes thought they'd steal her day, they were wrong." And just like that, the mood shifted. We left the church and made our way to the reception hall, the one that had been meticulously decorated for a celebration that would never happen. White tablecloths draped across round tables, centerpieces of roses and baby's breath still perfumed the air. The DJ's booth gleamed in the corner, ready to play music for a first dance that no longer existed. At first, the sight broke my heart all over again. The ghost of what should have been hung heavy in every detail: the engraved champagne flutes, the flower wall meant for romantic photographs, the cake, pristine and untouched, waiting for a bride and groom who no longer existed. I stood frozen at the entrance, the weight of the day pressing down on me again. Then my mother's hand slid into mine. "Mija," she said firmly, "this isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning. Now go. Dance." And somehow, impossibly, I did. The DJ, clearly uncertain, glanced at me. I gave a small nod. His fingers hovered, then pressed play. Music filled the room, joyful, defiant. The guests poured in, cautious at first, then with growing energy. They filled plates with the food I had chosen after countless tastings. They clinked glasses filled with the champagne I had saved to buy. They laughed, they cried, they danced. And me? I danced too. Not with Colton, but with my father, my brother, my cousins, my friends. My gown dragged across the floor, my shoes kicked off somewhere under the head table, my hair coming undone from hours of tears and confrontation. But for the first time that day, I felt something that wasn't rage, wasn't heartbreak, wasn't humiliation. I felt free. "Raise a glass," my cousin Maria shouted at one point, her voice bold. She lifted her champagne high. "To Isabella, who turned betrayal into the greatest plot twist of our lives." "To Isabella," the room chorused, glasses clinking, laughter echoing off the walls. I flushed, overwhelmed, but I lifted my glass too. For once, the toast wasn't to a couple. It was to me, alone. And somehow, it felt right. As the night deepened, I slipped away to a quieter corner, needing a moment to breathe. My phone buzzed endlessly with notifications. Messages from strangers flooded my inbox. "Girl, you're my hero. I just saw the video. Thank you for showing women we don't have to take betrayal lying down. I left my cheating fiancé last year, but I wish I had done it like you. You're an inspiration. This is the best wedding video ever. Netflix, please." Each one was surreal. Each one chipped away at the image of myself as merely a victim. Sydney found me, holding 2 glasses of wine. She handed me one, smirking. "So, how does it feel being famous?" "Famous?" I scoffed, shaking my head. "I didn't ask for this." "True." She clinked her glass against mine. "But maybe you deserve it." I thought about that as I sipped. Maybe this wasn't fame. Maybe it was something else. Recognition. Proof that standing up for yourself, no matter how messy, no matter how painful, had value. Across the room, laughter rose again, the guests twirling on the dance floor. My family stood at the center, radiant, protective, unbroken. And me, I stood taller than I had in months. Because Karen and Colton had thought they ruined me. But instead, they had given me the platform to show the world exactly who I was. By morning, my life was no longer mine. When I woke, my phone was buzzing so violently on the nightstand that I thought it might leap to the floor. Notifications rolled in by the hundreds, then thousands, each one another reminder that the world had witnessed my ruin and my revenge in real time. I scrolled in disbelief. Clips of me standing at the altar, smiling coldly at Karen, were now stitched into countless TikToks with captions like, "This bride is a legend," and "Justice served." At the altar. Twitter threads dissected every second of the confrontation like it was a courtroom drama. Memes of Colton's pale face and Karen's collapse flooded Instagram. I wasn't just a woman who'd been betrayed, I had become entertainment. By mid-morning, the reporters arrived. The first knock came as I sat at my parents' kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee I couldn't seem to swallow. My father answered, only to find two cameramen and a reporter from Channel 7 News standing on the porch, microphones at the ready. "Ms. Morton," the reporter called, her tone urgent. "Can we get a statement about what happened at your wedding yesterday?" My father slammed the door in their faces. "Vultures," he muttered, stalking back into the kitchen. But they didn't stop. Within an hour, more had gathered. The driveway was lined with news vans, the sidewalk crowded with cameras. They shouted questions whenever a curtain shifted or a door creaked open. "Isabella, how long did you know about the affair? Were you planning the trap for months? Do you consider yourself a hero?" Hero. The word rang in my head, heavy and strange. Before I could answer it for myself, my phone rang. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another unknown number, another stranger who had somehow found me. But the caller ID flashed Detective Rivera. I answered quickly. "Detective?" His steady voice anchored me. "Isabella, I wanted to give you an update. We've finished preliminary questioning with Colton and Karen." My pulse quickened. "And?" "They confessed to nearly everything," he said. "The fraud, the embezzlement, the stolen inheritance. Colton broke within 10 minutes of interrogation. Karen lasted a little longer, but once we showed her the evidence you provided, she cracked." I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. Relief. Vindication. A strange, hollow ache that justice didn't erase. "They'll be charged formally within the week," Rivera continued. "Given the amount stolen and the conspiracy involved, they're both looking at multiple felony counts. Prison, not just jail." Prison. The word should have brought me peace. Instead, it left me numb. These were people I had loved, people I had trusted. Hearing their punishment made it real in a way even the handcuffs hadn't. "Thank you," I said softly. "You did most of the work," Rivera replied. "Frankly, Isabella, you built a stronger case than some detectives. I've rarely seen someone gather evidence as thoroughly as you did." "I'm a nurse," I said automatically. "We're trained to be detail-oriented." "You're also braver than most people I know," he said firmly. "Don't forget that." When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the darkened phone screen. Brave, hero, icon. Words the world seemed determined to pin on me. But inside, I still felt like the woman who had once dreamed of walking down that aisle with her heart full of hope. By afternoon, the media storm intensified. A stranger with a press badge slipped through my parents' backyard fence, nearly tripping over the rose bushes in her haste. My brother Tristan nearly threw her back onto the street before my mother intervened. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get more surreal, Sydney burst into the kitchen, her phone in her hand, her eyes blazing with excitement. "You need to take this call," she said breathlessly. "What call?" She thrust the phone at me. "It's the Ellen Show." I blinked. "You're kidding." "Do I look like I'm kidding?" I swallowed hard and pressed the phone to my ear. "Hello?" A bright, professional voice came through. "Hello, Isabella. This is Sarah from Ellen's production team. We've all seen your story, and Ellen herself would love to have you on the show next week. She thinks your courage is extraordinary and wants to celebrate your strength." My knees nearly buckled. Ellen DeGeneres, a woman I had watched on TV for years. Now she wanted me on her stage. I don't know what to say," I stammered. "Say yes," Sydney mouthed at me furiously, bouncing on her toes. I took a breath. I'd be honored. "Wonderful," Sarah said warmly. "We'll send over the details. Congratulations, Isabella. The world needs to hear your story." When I hung up, Sydney shrieked and tackled me into a hug. "You're going to be on Ellen! You're going to be famous!" I laughed, dazed, still holding the phone loosely in my hand. "Famous for being betrayed," I said wryly. "No," Sydney corrected, her voice fierce. "Famous for refusing to stay silent." The words sank deep into me. Outside, reporters still swarmed. Online, strangers dissected every second of my downfall and revenge. The legal system was already grinding forward with charges and evidence, and now I was being invited to sit on a stage and tell millions more. My story wasn't just mine anymore. The world was watching. That night, after the reporters finally left and the house settled into uneasy quiet, I slipped out into my parents' garden. The summer air was thick with the scent of jasmine, fairy lights strung along the fence glowing like captured stars. My wedding dress was gone, replaced by one of Sydney's old hoodies and a pair of jeans. The contrast made me laugh bitterly. This morning, I'd been a bride. Tonight, I was just a woman trying to find her footing again. Sydney joined me a few minutes later, carrying 2 glasses of wine. She handed me one and plopped down beside me on the wooden bench. You know, she said, swirling the liquid, most people would be curled up in bed crying after a day like yours. Instead, you turned a wedding into a courtroom drama and a viral sensation. I smirked faintly, staring at the bubbles in my glass. Doesn't mean I'm not crying on the inside. She bumped her shoulder against mine. You're allowed to, but you're also allowed to dream again. So tell me, Issa, what now? The question caught me off guard. For 3 years, my what now had always included Colton. Our apartment, our plans for kids, vacations we never took, promises we never kept. My entire future had been built around a man who had betrayed me in every way possible. Now, that blueprint was ash. I don't know, I admitted, my voice quiet. I haven't been single since I was 25. I don't even remember what I like to do when I'm not someone's half. Sydney leaned back, watching me with patient eyes. Then start small. What's one thing you've always wanted to do but didn't because of him? I hesitated. Then the words slipped out before I could stop them. Travel. Europe. I always dreamed of backpacking through Spain and Italy, but Colton said it was too expensive. He said we should wait until after the wedding, after the house, after kids, after. Somehow, after never came. Sydney grinned. So take the trip now. You've got the money you're not spending on a honeymoon or a cheating husband. A laugh burst from me, unexpected and bright. True. What else? She pressed. I took a sip of wine, thinking. I want to go back to school, get my master's in pediatric nursing, maybe specialize in trauma care. I've seen too many kids come into the ER with injuries that haunt them for life. I want to be the one who helps them heal. Sydney's eyes softened. You'd be incredible at that. I nodded, my chest tightening with something that felt suspiciously like hope. And I want a dog, a big one. Colton was allergic, so we never could. I used to dream about a golden retriever, or maybe a shepherd. Someone who'd greet me at the door without judgment, without lies. Get 2, Sydney teased. 1 to guard you, 1 to cuddle. We laughed together, the sound weaving through the night air, easing some of the heaviness. I grew quiet again, staring at the wine swirling in my glass. I also want to learn to dance, real dancing. Not the stiff foxtrot lessons Colton and I took just to impress guests. I want salsa, bachata, the kind of dancing that makes you sweat and laugh at the same time. Now you're talking, Sydney said, her grin widening. Finally, Isabella Morton doing something just for Isabella Morton. I exhaled slowly, the words spilling out before I could second-guess them. I don't want to be the woman who ignores red flags because she's afraid of being alone. I don't want to be someone who lets people walk all over her just because she's nice. I want to be someone I'm proud of. Sydney turned toward me fully, her expression fierce. Asa, look at what you did today. That wasn't weakness. That wasn't naivety. That was power. You gathered evidence. You faced them head on. You stood in front of 200 people and turned humiliation into justice. If that's not someone to be proud of, I don't know what is. Tears pricked at my eyes, but this time I didn't fight them. One slipped free, then another. It was pretty badass, wasn't it? I whispered. Legendary, Sydney corrected. They'll tell stories about today for years. You're not just some girl who got cheated on. You're the woman who exposed it, who refused to bow, who buried them with the truth. I wiped at my cheeks, laughing through the tears. God, you make it sound cinematic. It was cinematic, she insisted. The church, the recording, the DNA test, the cops storming in. If Spielberg had filmed it, people would have said it was too dramatic to be real. I shook my head, overwhelmed, and set my wine glass down on the bench. My phone buzzed again in my hoodie pocket. I pulled it out, intending to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. A text from an unknown number. Saw your video online. You're my hero. My ex cheated last year, and I wish I'd had your courage. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like. Another came immediately after. You don't know me, but your story gave me the push I needed. I'm leaving my toxic marriage tonight. You saved me. My breath caught. Message after message rolled in. Strangers pouring their hearts out, thanking me, calling me brave, saying my story gave them hope. I showed the phone to Sydney, my voice barely a whisper. This is insane. She read a few messages, then looked up at me, her eyes shining. You see, you're not just healing yourself, Issa. You're helping others heal too. I pressed the phone against my chest, overwhelmed. Maybe she was right. Maybe my pain wasn't wasted if it lit the path for someone else. Sydney stood, stretching. So what happens now? I looked up at her, the jasmine-scented air filling my lungs. For the first time all day, the future didn't feel like a void. It felt like a horizon. Now, I said slowly, I start over. Not as someone's fiancé, not as someone's half, just me. Sydney smiled, reaching down to squeeze my hand. Then let's make sure the world sees you for who you really are. 8 months later, I'm writing this from a cafe in Barcelona, sipping sangria while the Mediterranean sun bleeds gold across the horizon. The sea breeze smells of salt and citrus, and somewhere nearby, a guitarist strums a tune that feels like freedom itself. 8 months ago, I thought my life had ended at the altar. Now I realize it was only beginning. After the wedding that wasn't, I packed a single suitcase, bought a rail pass, and left. Spain, Italy, France. I wandered cobblestone streets, ate gelato for breakfast, got lost in winding alleys where laundry fluttered between balconies, danced barefoot in town squares when locals pulled me into festivals I didn't understand but felt in my bones. For the first time in years, every choice was mine. Where to go, what to eat, who to meet. I wasn't someone's fiancé, someone's second choice, someone's fool. I was Isabella Morton, a woman discovering herself in foreign cities where no one knew my name. The Ellen Show appearance came first. I sat under bright lights, cameras rolling, as Ellen asked me to walk through what happened. My voice shook at first, but then the audience gasped, laughed, clapped in all the right places, and I realized something. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been betrayed, who had ever felt small, who had ever wished they could stand up for themselves. That interview led to others. Morning shows, magazines, podcasts. Eventually, a book deal. I poured my heart into the pages. Every red flag I ignored, every excuse I made, every truth I uncovered. By the time I was done, I realized it wasn't a story about betrayal at all. It was a story about survival. The book sparked invitations to conferences and women's retreats. I stood on stages in front of strangers, sharing the lessons I had clawed out of heartbreak. At first, my knees shook every time, but then I'd see women nodding, eyes brimming with tears, and I knew. I wasn't just healing myself, I was giving others permission to heal too. Meanwhile, justice took its course back home. Colton and Karen were both sentenced to 4 years in prison. Multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. They'll be eligible for parole in 18 months, but I won't be attending the hearings. I don't need to see them beg for mercy. I already gave them all the mercy I ever had when I trusted them, and they squandered it. The baby was born 7 months after the wedding, a boy with dark hair and lungs strong enough to rattle the hospital halls, according to Rachel, who surprised everyone by forgiving James. Against all odds, they're raising the child together. I still don't know how she found that kind of grace in her heart. Maybe love makes some people blind, the way it once blinded me. Or maybe she's stronger than I can understand. Michael's wife divorced him, took half of everything, and moved across the country with her sister. She sent me a handwritten thank you card. "You saved me years of wasted life," it read. "I can't thank you enough." As for me, I sold the apartment Colton and I once shared and bought a little house with a garden. My dog, Luna, a rescue shepherd with fur the color of storm clouds, spends her afternoons chasing butterflies across the yard. She's loyal in a way Colton never was, and every time she curls against me at night, I feel more loved than I ever did sharing a bed with him. I also applied to graduate school. Next month, I'll begin a master's program in pediatric trauma nursing. I want to be the person children see when their world has crumbled, the one who helps them stitch themselves back together. Because if I've learned anything, it's that brokenness doesn't have to be the end. Sometimes it's the doorway to something new. And yes, I finally learned to salsa dance. I'm terrible at it. My steps are awkward. I trip over my own feet. I laugh so hard my stomach aches. But I love it. For once, dancing isn't about impressing anyone. It's about joy, pure and simple. Sometimes people recognize me on the street. They stop me in airports or grocery stores asking, "Are you the wedding bride? The one who exposed them?" At first, I hated it. But then one woman pulled me into a hug, tears spilling down her cheeks, and whispered, Because of you, I left my abusive husband. Because of you, I'm free. That was when I understood. This isn't about viral fame, it's about impact. My pain became a mirror where others saw their own strength reflected. Do I regret it? People ask me that often. Do I regret turning my wedding into a spectacle? Do I regret humiliating the people I once loved? Do I regret making my heartbreak public? The answer is always no. I don't regret choosing truth over comfort. I don't regret demanding justice instead of accepting betrayal. And I certainly don't regret discovering my own strength in the process. The woman who walked down that aisle 8 months ago was hoping to find happiness in someone else's arms. The woman sitting here in Barcelona watching the sky melt into the sea knows happiness comes from building a life you're proud of, whether or not anyone walks beside you. I'm not searching for my next relationship. I'm not trying to replace what I lost. I'm creating something entirely new. And if someone someday wants to be part of it, they'll have to earn it. They'll have to prove they deserve the love of a woman who knows her worth. Because I've learned something vital. Betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise after betrayal does. And I'm rising. When people ask me what my wedding day taught me, I never give them the answer they expect. They expect bitterness, rage, a litany of curses for the people who betrayed me. And don't get me wrong. There were days when anger consumed me, when I wanted to scream their names into the void until the world itself recoiled. But that's not the lesson I carry now. Because if betrayal is a fire, then survival is the forge. And I walked out of those flames tempered, stronger than I ever imagined. I think back to that church sometimes. The way the sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting my gown in colors that should have symbolized joy, but instead framed a battlefield. The gasps, the whispers, the weight of 200 eyes watching my life unravel in real time. It should have broken me. By all rights, it could have broken me. But it didn't. Because standing there, stripped of every illusion, I discovered something I had never truly understood. I was enough on my own. Colton's betrayal didn't define me. Karen's deceit didn't erase me. Their lies, their theft, their selfishness, it all fell away the moment I chose to stop begging for love and start demanding respect. For years, I had lived small. I had ignored red flags because the thought of being alone terrified me more than the quiet ache of suspicion. I had shrunk myself to fit into Colton's world, convincing myself that his approval was the same as happiness. But the truth is, the most dangerous kind of betrayal isn't what others do to you. It's what you allow yourself to believe you deserve. That day, in front of God, my family, my friends, and the world watching through 1,000 phone screens, I stopped believing I deserved scraps. I deserved honesty, loyalty, respect, and when I wasn't given those things, I gave myself something better, freedom. The months since then have been strange, beautiful, terrifying. I've stood on stages telling my story to strangers who saw themselves in my pain. I've danced under foreign skies with people whose names I'll never know. I've walked through cities older than memory and realized how small my heartbreak really was compared to the vastness of the world. And yet, despite everything I've done, despite the applause, the book deals, the interviews, the recognition, my proudest moment isn't any of those. It's the quiet ones. It's Luna, my dog, curling up beside me after a long day, her steady breathing reminding me that love can be simple. It's the smell of coffee in the morning, in my own little house, sunlight stretching across the floorboards like a blessing. It's studying late at night, textbooks spread out, my pen moving furiously as I chase a dream I nearly abandoned. These are the moments no betrayal can steal. People still stop me sometimes. They tell me my story gave them courage to leave an unfaithful partner, or strength to demand honesty from a friend, or hope that even in the ashes of destruction, something new can grow. And every time I tell them the same thing. Your worth is not measured by how much pain you can endure for the sake of someone else. Your worth is not defined by whether a lover chooses you or a friend remains loyal. Your worth is already there, untouched, unbreakable, waiting for you to claim it. The person who matters most in your love story is you. I used to think happily ever afters came from weddings, rings, and promises whispered in candlelight. Now I know better. Happily ever afters come when you build a life you're proud of, one that doesn't vanish if someone walks away. Maybe someday love will find me again. Maybe it won't. Either way, I'll be fine, because I don't need someone to complete me. I am whole. And that, strangely, beautifully, is the greatest gift betrayal ever gave me. So when people ask me what my wedding day taught me, I smile. Not the bitter smile I wore at the altar, not the shark's grin of revenge, but a true smile, one born of survival, of freedom, of self-worth. And I tell them, my wedding day taught me that sometimes the greatest love story you'll ever write is the one where you choose yourself. Because I did, and I'm never going back.